I am Ralph with 13 Peppers, and in today's video we're going to be starting off my 2022 growing season. So let's start planting those seeds. I have been getting quite a few inquiries and emails and DMs on the website, some of the social medias on what I do to actually grow peppers. How I do it, what I use, when should I actually do it, and what I decided to do is to go ahead and make a grow series so I can update weekly on what the process is, what I'm doing, and what I actually do specifically. Now, this series is not to show this is the only way to do things, because it's not. There's so many different people out there that are growing different varieties that work differently, different climates, different things that they've always done right. There's quite a few different ways of doing things. This here is just to show what I specifically do. So we'll go ahead and get into it. One of the biggest questions I've actually had over the last few weeks is a lot of people asking me, when do I start my seeds? I don't know exactly when I should start my seeds. And now that answer would depend on where you live, your climate, and everything like that. But typically you want to start anywhere between 8 to 12 weeks before the final frost, so you can set your plants out right after that. Now here where I live, east of Cincinnati, our final frost is roughly anywhere between the first, second week of May. And with that, I also like starting my seeds roughly 12 weeks ahead instead of waiting to the 8th, just because a lot of the super hots I tend to find take a long time to actually finally germinate. So typically, like what I'm doing today being February 15th, this is when I'm going to be starting my seeds, and over the next 2 days I'll go ahead and plant my 100+ varieties to get everything going and started. One of the next questions I get is, what do I actually start my seeds in? What kind of soil do I need? What is the mixture? What's ratio? Different things. And for me, over the last decade, I have used a bunch of different things, tried stuff, failed, whatnot, but for the last 4 or 5 years, I've actually been growing my seed starting in a seed starting mix, which is basically just pure peat moss. With these seeds and everything they have in there, inside that little container where the seed grows out of, actually has enough nutrients, minerals, and everything it needs to actually have a really good start, to put out a nice decent root and everything else. So you don't have to have a mix with anything in it. So what you see, especially if you buy from the store and a seed starting mix, there's nothing in there besides basically peat moss. Now what I do is, typically what I like is the Jiffy. Basically it is just a natural organic seed starting mix. There's nothing in here besides peat moss, and it makes it nice and neat. The other thing good with it being a peat moss is when it does not compact. Even though when it gets wet and soil on there too, it's not going to bind the roots. It's going to still stay airy, hold the moisture, and let your roots and everything start. Now, I do not use as a starting mix garden soil or potting mix. You can, but you do have a tendency to actually, those soils and everything to compact. You can use perlite or anything else on that to try to keep the soil airy so you have room for the roots and everything. But with those soils, they usually have a lot of other stuff mixed into there, sticks, gravel, a bunch of other little things in there, which is not really what you actually need. Your seeds need room to be able to spread out their roots, and they don't need anything blocking their way. And then on top of that, the nutrients that are actually in potting soil, garden soil, whatnot, is just going to be an overkill, so it's not anything you need. So you just want to make sure that your seeds actually have enough root and a space to actually grow. One of the other things that I do when I'm starting my seeds is I'll put some of the seed starting mix in a container, and then what I will do is I will add water to it because I want to go ahead and moisten up the soil. One of the things I do with the water is a few months beforehand, I start saving containers, typically 2 liters, they could be milk jugs or whatnot, and clean those out real good, and then I start just putting water in there. The reason I do that, and I'll have water sitting in these containers weeks before I use it. Typically when you get water from your local tap or whatever, it's going to contain a certain amount of chlorine in that. That's just how it does to actually keep everything and you safe. That really is not the best for seeds sometimes, so I try to actually avoid that. And what I do is I let that sit, and then once you have the bottles and everything sit for a while, that chlorine will naturally leach out of that water. So that's typically what I do. Now once I put the water in the soil, I just make sure it's mixed up so the soil becomes nice and moist. And we'll do that here. Now once you have your soil and everything mixed up and your water, you know you'll have it hydrated just correctly when you can actually squeeze it just a little bit and it holds together into a shape, but not so much so when you squeeze it that water actually drips out of your hands. So that would be pre-moistened just perfectly right there. And then what I do is I take my 6-celled trays and I fill it full of soil. Okay. Once it's full, I go ahead and I compress each one of the cells down. And then I put in a second layer. Now the second layer I do not compress down because I want room for the seeds. So, and then that's what I do. Go ahead and start filling up my trays. Push in the cells. Put in the second layer. That's good. We have our seed starting mix already into our tray, and we're ready to actually start placing our seeds. Couple things I want to go over why I do some things the way I do. First of all, when you do get these little 6-celled trays, they usually come in a whole sheet. And this particular one would have a total of 12 of these 6-part trays in a single sheet. So what I do is I break them apart specifically. That way I actually grow a single species of pepper in a 6-part tray, because that way when I'm growing multiple peppers and some are sprouting while some are not, the ones that actually sprout early I'm able to take out of the actual tray and move to a different area of my grow space, while I can keep the other ones still underneath the dome and humidity to go ahead and help their best germination. So that's one reason I do it. Second reason I do it is because these trays, it's easy to take one out to do your bottom watering, because you really don't want to water everything on top, at least for me, because then it has a potential of moving around seeds before they actually germinate. If you go ahead and bottom water, it's actually going to draw the soil and everything will draw the water up, and then everything will be good. So the other thing that I do is I go ahead and I pick out a bunch of seeds, which I have a bunch of ones that I have here now. And what I do is I pick out the one, these are Bondamal Jacob Orange. I have a ton of seeds there, if you can tell. But one thing that I do is, if you notice, is once I save my seeds from a previous year, I go ahead and put them in a container. I use one of these silicone gel things to make sure that I don't get any moisture or anything in the container. That actually helps my seeds not have any issues. But once I have the container and I know what I want, I'm going to go ahead and make the label that I need. And with the label, I'll go ahead and start this. Okay. Now, the other thing I do is I use plastic labels. That way I can move them around however I need to, and I don't have to worry about them breaking down or whatnot. I did in the past use these wooden labels, And the reason I don't use these anymore is because these are prone to actually suck up the water out of the soil. And also, if you ever used a Sharpie on a wooden stake, when the water hits it and everything, it kind of expands out the grains in the wood, and it does make it a lot harder to see, especially if you have a lot of writing on here. The other reason is because the moisture comes up. These, for me, have always been prone to gathering mold and stuff on them and then spreading to the rest of the plants. So that's another reason why I don't actually use these wooden stakes anymore. If it's just going to be a short time, that's not a problem, but since I do keep the seedlings indoors for closer to 12 weeks than the 8, these always ended up being a problem for me and having to be replaced or rewritten. So that's why I go ahead and I use these plastic ones here. Now, when I do start putting seeds into the trays, I do wear a glove, because even though it's just pepper seeds, you still have all the capsaicin on the seed as you did with the pepper. And it's a lot easier at that point to not get it all over your hands. So what I do here is I go ahead and I pick out a couple seeds. All right. And I typically drop 2 in a tray. Here, since I have a ton of seeds, I'm going to go ahead and drop 3. Now, the reason that I put multiple seeds into each cell of the tray is because the pepper seeds, there is not 100% germination rate. Anybody tells you that there's 100% germination rate is flat out lying. Now, you can get everything to germinate, but rarely are you going to have 100%. You usually have 1, maybe 2 that don't germinate, and depending on the peppers, some peppers are inherently hard to germinate. I have one species that only has like a 40% germination rate on it, so I like doing multiple seeds per tray. And then if I have, like for example, this cell fails, but this one has 2 come out of it, then hey, then that works, and I'll separate the 2 and I'll put 1 back into this tray over here. Also too, if I have all the peppers coming up in a tray and a couple of the cells have a couple extra peppers, then at that point I can decide which one actually looks like a stronger seedling, and then I can trim it down at that point. So that way I end up, for the most part, 6 pepper plants of the variety I'm trying to grow. So once I get my seeds and everything in here, I just take it and I just put them barely underneath the soil. Okay, and then lightly cover them up. I don't ever put them down too far. And then once I have that cells done, then I go ahead and I stick my label in. And then that is ready to go. Now that I actually have all the seeds and everything into the tray, that tray is labeled, I just take basically a water bottle and I lightly just spritz the top. Not much water at all. That's just to get a little bit of liquid contact on that soil. I don't want to disrupt the top of the soil and loosen up those seeds or expose the seeds. And then going forward, I'm just going to go ahead and I will be bottom watering the entire tray once it's up in the grow area. Once I have my tray of seeds and everything, I'm going to go ahead and put it in my grow area. Now this is my dune grow area that I've actually done this year. I got a space for all the heat mats. And one thing you want to do is, before you set your seeds out and everything like that, make sure your heat mats are working, especially if you've had them for multiple years. Unfortunately, I tested them earlier. I had one die, and I was able to order one and get that in last week. So they are good to go. I have everything wired. I got my lights and everything up here. They are 6500s on 6500 lumens. And I have them also set up on a timer. When your seeds are in the tray and they haven't sprouted yet, light's not really a factor. But
once they actually do come up, and light will actually play. Because if you don't have light, then your seedlings and everything will get really leggy trying to look for that light. So I go ahead, even before the seedlings are up, I go ahead and have the lights running for 18 hours a day, and they are set on a timer on the wall. So once that tray's there, we're gonna go ahead and put the top on. Now with the dome, there's some of them out there that do not have holes in them. These actually have holes. And if you have one that doesn't have a hole in it, just go ahead and drill a couple holes in it. That way you have some airflow and everything, because one thing that seedlings and everything else do need is to make sure that you actually have airflow. So that is one of the 12 or 14 trays that I have to actually do. And that is the starting of my seeds. This is just going to be the first in the series of videos. Just going to detail everything that I do through the 2022 growing season. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel. It helps me out greatly. You can also follow me at Facebook and Instagram at 13 Peppers by Ralph. Or you can also go to my website at 13 Peppers by Ralph if you are interested in any seeds for your garden. Once again, I thank you very much for watching the video, and you have yourself a very good day.